All right. Yeah, so nice to meet you all. It's a pleasure to be able to talk at this platform. My name is Midori. I'm a behavioral scientist at Social Machines. We are a company of behavioral scientists focused on research and innovation around cybersecurity, AI, and generally trying to develop systems of people and technology that are effective and ethical and strong. And for this talk, we'll be going through a bit of the work around improving cybersecurity through organizational culture. And I'm joined by my colleague and collaborator, Dr. Lena Podoletz at the Lancaster University School of Social Sciences. Lena is a lecturer in security and protection science, and we'll be jumping in towards the end of this talk. All right. So let's imagine you're running a cybersecurity awareness workshop at a company. You've been invited and you're giving this talk, and the people in there are not really engaged. They're thinking like, why isn't my boss here? Or just falling asleep. I don't understand any of this. Or you're talking about all these policies, but none of these are helpful for my work. And even some people are whispering to each other, hey, you think this is useless too, right? So before you start blaming these people, let's really listen to what they're saying, right? So, for example, maybe there's an aspect of leadership that's missing around cybersecurity in this company. And maybe people are being told to attend this workshop, but the knowledge development is generally inadequate. There isn't a lot of awareness around why this is even important in the first place. And perhaps the employee's point about policies being irrelevant to them might be true. Perhaps the policies at the organization is actually not really tailored to each individual's role, and people are not really seeing how it's relevant to them. And finally, maybe the general social environment is not supportive of cybersecurity. Maybe even if someone is interested in cybersecurity and learning to do better, the people around them are not supportive of that. So all of these issues are actually tied to the company's culture. We all know that most issues with cybersecurity involve some aspect of human behavior. Let's say you might be clicking on a phishing email link, or maybe you're using a USB key with your computer when you're not supposed to. But we think that organizational culture drives and sustains those behaviors. So we really need to understand and change the culture itself to make sure that any interventions and any changes you're making are sustainable. This is why we developed a product and tool called Temperature. And essentially, Temperature Platform is an online platform that's available to organizations to use. And it essentially focuses on measuring, understanding, and improving cybersecurity culture. It's very straightforward. Essentially, it helps you deliver short surveys to assess employees' feelings and attitudes with really simple questions around cybersecurity. And then on the admin side, let's say the cybersecurity manager at a company can look at the culture score along these social environment, policy, knowledge, and leadership dimensions, like the ones I talked about earlier. So let's get into a bit more of the science behind temperature, and this is where more of the academic and the industry side come together. In terms of the core development, we started with a lot of literature reviews around cybersecurity culture, measurement, and interventions. And we also conducted a lot of industry practitioner interviews and employee focus groups. And we've pilot tested this platform and the questions at multiple companies. And the whole platform was launched in June 2025. Of course, we don't stop there. There's a lot of expansion and obviously improvements that can be made. So for example, there was a literature review around updating the intervention catalog and evidence base. So the platform also has an element of suggesting different interventions to organizations, and that can obviously be improved. And then I mentioned how the platform uses surveys, but sometimes employees might not have the time or they might be wary of being told to do a bunch of surveys in the company. So there might be alternative methods as well, which we explored with literature reviews. And then right now, we're specifically focused on the cybersecurity domain, but obviously things around organizational culture is relevant in, let's say, physical health and safety, as well as AI maturity and readiness. So right now, we are also partnering with different organizations and conducting literature reviews to expand the temperature product into these other domains as well. We are also working to translate the platform into 6 languages. As you can imagine, a lot of organizations that might have these issues and want to improve their cybersecurity are spread across the world, and they have different employees across different countries and different regions. So that becomes really critical to make sure that we're supporting all employees. And obviously, things like the survey requires a lot of validation efforts, and that's still on the way as well. And now I want to pass on to my colleague Lena on talking about the first two literature reviews around the intervention and the alternative methods to survey.
Yes, so the literature review on interventions accounted for 70 different possible interventions to influence cybersecurity culture. And this review focused on peer-reviewed academic literature, and more specifically, empirical. It was a non-systematic review, empirical evidence of intervention effectiveness. So, for example, purely theoretical papers were excluded from the review. And the first finding was that the evidence base in this area is quite limited when we are thinking about just cybersecurity culture. So the review was expanded to include just general organizational culture and organizational change literature as well. And as for the findings, some examples of promising interventions include after-action reviews, for instance, after a cybersecurity incident, storytelling through, for instance, comics, and group huddles, which are now quite well evidenced in the healthcare sector. As for the alternative methods to literature review, here the aim was to basically come up with some methods that may be alternatives to surveys as to measuring cybersecurity culture, because surveys have some limitations, including they can be susceptible to biases, for example, due to memory constraints and desirability, as well as the survey fatigue is also a known phenomenon. So it was the aim to explore these alternatives. And ultimately, another non-systematic literature review was performed on literature to measure cybersecurity culture. And ultimately, these methods were grouped together, and two types of metrics or measurements were derived. One type was organizational practices and organizational behavior, and the other type was employee behavior. So I'm just going to now say a little bit about both of these types of measurements, just with some examples. So the first category was organizational practices and organizational behaviors. Here, one subcategory or sub-theme was organizational policies. So here, think of, for example, whether a company has a strategy towards adopting user-friendly and high usability tools, whether they have a strategy for providing hands-on training for employees, or whether, for example, if an incident happens, they have a confidential reporting process. The next category was leadership. Here, think of things like, for example, whether the leadership is clearly communicating cybersecurity expectations towards the workers at the company, or whether there is a well-defined decision-making structure for crisis response. And the third category was responses to past incidents, which is a bit similar to an after-action review, where for example, certain metrics could include the speed of detection, or whether there was collaboration between the IT security team and other teams, for instance, the legal team or communication team, to notify clients, for example, about the cybersecurity breach. And the next category of potential measurements was employee behavior. And here we could distinguish between general behavior and employee testing. Just measuring general behavior could include things like safe use of safe systems and tools by the employees, like how they behave on their daily routine at work, for example, browsing security, whether they use the VPN if they are advised to, whether they click past, for example, a malicious website warning and just visit the site anyway. It could include data security, whereas also incident reporting behavior could be important. These are, again, just examples. There were many more of these metrics identified. And the second one is employee testing, which could include, for example, response to phishing emails and click-through of malicious communications. And now I give it back to Midori.
Right, thanks a lot. Yeah, so on the whole, improving cybersecurity culture requires ongoing continuous process across organization, and it really needs to be evidence-based, we think. There's a lot of different recommendations and a lot of interventions around cybersecurity and cybersecurity culture, but we think that the key is to always collect the data, test what you're doing, and continuous cycle of making sure that what we're doing is effective. And so we also adopt this attitude of being curious and open. Obviously, like we've presented today, there's a lot of things that are in the works and there's a lot more improvements to make. And so we're always open to feedback and always looking to collaborate across people. And so generally we embrace this mindset in developing Temperature itself as well. So we just want to wrap up here, and I just want to let everyone know that if you want to know more about Temperature, please feel free to reach out to our director, Nick Welding. His email, phone, and LinkedIn address is right up on the screen right now. Of course, you can reach out to Lena and I as well if that's easier, and we can connect you to Nick if you want to hear more about the Temperature and how it works within companies.